Hello and welcome to Get Yourself Optimized. I'm your host, Stephan Spencer. I'm so pleased and excited to have Colette Baron-Reid with us. Colette is a best-selling author, an internationally acclaimed oracle expert, a spiritual intuitive, a personal transformation thought leader, educator, and speaker with over 30 years of experience on global stages, television, radio, and film. She hosts Inside the WOONIVERSE, a podcast series that uncovers personal stories of spiritual awakening and transformation. Colette, it's so great to have you on the show.
Oh, I'm excited to be here. Thank you. I love your show and the kind of conversations that you have. So I'm very excited to be here. Totally pumped.
Oh, wonderful. Wonderful, wonderful. Me too. It's been a long time in the making. Both been our teams have been
I
working to get
know.
this episode happening for a number of
We did
months.
it.
Yes, we did it. So let's start off by if you could share a little bit of your origin story with our
Oh,
listener who's
gosh.
not familiar with you. You have a big following. You have this, fantastic tribe of enthusiastic people, but not everybody knows about you. So, how did you
Sure.
end up in the woo-woo space,
What the
and
woo woo space. All
yes,
right.
and
So,
like what was the big transformation that catapulted you here?
so the woo woo space, that's we like to playfully call it the Wooniverse because it's a loving way to talk about what other people can sometimes see as as too fringe. But my first experience with knowing things that I shouldn't know without any access to any intellectual or five sensory, story, experience or storytelling was when I started having a series of dreams between the age of 3 and 5. Actually, there were nightmares, and it was the exact same one every time, where I would dream about a long lineup of very skinny, skeletal, naked people moving towards what looked like a desk and a pile of teeth and a pile of gold. And then this very skeletal looking man or skeletal looking man crying at the table. Then I would see snow that looked like snow, and I would smell like what's bad meat, like it smelled like bad meat, which later, many years later, I realized I was smelling what smelled like an abattoir, which is where they kill animals. Anyway, so my mom wouldn't pick me up. So there any other dream, my mom would hold me, pick me up or whatever. But my mother, I could tell as a little kid that I was being rejected when I had this dream. So I was quite frightened. Many, many more weird experiences where I knew things about people I shouldn't, etc. But that particular dream, when my father lost all the family's money when I was about 23 or 24, my mother had a bit too much to drink. I was wearing a cross she bought me, and she said, "Take that off. You're a Jew." And I'm like, "What?" So she had raised us as Christians and actually Anglican, which is like Catholicism without a pope because of Henry VIII. But because that was the way she was a German immigrant. My father was from Serbia. My mother was actually Polish, but turns out we were Jewish and she didn't tell us. So that was my grandfather who was killed in Dachau. And they used to take the teeth out before they would gas the inmates or the people who were in the concentration camp. They would pull out the gold of their teeth so that the SS officers could make jewelry for out of they took the gold and turned it into jewelry,
Mm.
etc. So that was something about my heritage I knew nothing about, but I saw it with great clarity, and other things along the way. I'm not going to bore you with that whole thing, but I had an ability. Now, I'll go back in time a little bit more. My nanny, we had a Scottish nanny, her name Mrs. Kelly. She had like really curly, kind of bluish hair, and she croaked like a frog. She had something wrong with her esophagus, and she used to tell my mother that I had the sight. And I thought I remember hiding. We had one of those dining room doors that would go like this, in and out. And she told my mother that I had the sight, and I thought she meant that I didn't need glasses. Because everybody in my family wore glasses. I was really happy, and my mother was freaking out on her. No, 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 like this. And I'm like, what is that? Because I used to tell my nanny stories of things that I would see in the garden. Anyway, fast forward to when I was 14, I get this. Really, I inherited this from my father. My father was Serbian and Mongolian. My great grandmother was Mongolian, and my dad was from Serbia. And the Slavic traditions are seeped in animism, folklore, etc. So he taught me how to read Turkish coffee cups when I was 14, but at the same time told me I was going to law school. So it was kind of like I had this mystical, amazing father who, who told me about all these things and about Atlantis and raised me with Eric von Däniken and UFOs and things. So I had a very interesting education with that. But very clearly, I was supposed to fit in to society, become a lawyer, etc., and forget about all that stuff that I had naturally. Same storyline, same. I was only interested in music, of course, so I ran away, etc. But it really hit home. The abilities that I had hit home after a very violent episode when I was 19, and I had a psychotic break during it. I won't go into too much detail here; it's not important. But it was like a near-death experience where I could be very dispassionate about what was going on, and I could see the storylines of these men that were abusing me, and where I was able to corroborate the stories later. So I knew I had some kind of access. I got clean and sober when I was 27. So during that time, I became a drug addict and an alcoholic, and continued to, invite some situations in my life that I take responsibility for that were violent. But when I got clean and sober, I really devoted myself to a spiritual path. And after about a couple of years, it started coming through that I had this ability that I could see things about people very clearly. So while I was pursuing a career in music, which was really what I wanted to do, for my day job, I was a aromatherapist. I was the first one, I think, registered in Canada. This is like going 35 years ago. And as soon as I started touching people, I would see their stories and I would tell them. And then literally within a month or so, nobody wanted to book a massage. They just wanted to book time to talk to me because they would tell their friends who told their friends. And so basically and I had already learned the tarot. So basically, I developed a whole, way to read people through aromatherapy oils because I had so many of them. And then I started using the tarot because I could. And the next thing you know, that became my career. But I didn't want it, which was kind of interesting because it's how I got really well known. And I just kept pursuing something that didn't want me. And when I wasn't looking, this is what happened. Kind of the best way I could say it. But I will say this. One of the things that I am known for is something that I became very passionate about, which is I studied many different forms of ancient divination. I'm a complete nerd. And I sat for many, many years in libraries looking at outdated, books and things because I wanted to understand what other people did to seek out their reflection the way I could naturally. What were their tools? The divinatory practices are thousands and thousands of years old, and some people poo-poo them. That's why I make a joke and call it the WOONIVERSE, right? People say it's woo-woo, but ultimately there are systems of lexicons or vocabularies that are symbolic and metaphoric that really touch the collective and universal consciousness that all of us are part of. So I started really diving into that. And then I decided after the tarot became restrictive to me because it was fixed and it never changed, I was like, I want to create oracle cards. Like I want to create my own systems, which is what I've devoted my career to since, because I'm passionate about it, because I think modern people, so I've modernized these synthesis of a number of different ancient divination traditions in a way that people can use them to help navigate, especially turbulent, chaotic times when we're looking for certainty and we can't find it. So that's kind of, if I were to say in a nutshell, this is my origin story and how I got in front of you. And then of course I've written quite a few books. Well, actually not that many. I've only written 5, but one of them was a #1 bestseller for 10 entire days.
Congratulations.
I took pictures every day. Yeah. So, and then of course my interest was Jungian psychology, and I didn't get my degree, but again, Joseph Campbell, Jung, as I said, I'm a nerd, so I'm always studying, always learning, and I'm bringing what I learn. And I love quantum physics. That's my idea of porn. So, and I know that we are incredible co-creative beings. Human beings are capable of partnering with this conscious universe in such a way in which only our conditioning prevents us from really honoring and what we're really here to do. But I think we live in extraordinary times right now, and shows like yours that are highlighting some of the best teachers on the planet, that are able to, that kind of colloquial hack the system or hack the conditioning, can prove it. And we can prove it. So I'm excited to talk to you today.
Yeah, it's amazing that scientific evidence of things like using consciousness to change the outcomes of random number generators. This is just wild, and what an amazing time to be alive. Yeah.
I'm also, when you say that about using consciousness to impact a random number generator. So we actually use random number generators when in one of my masterminds that I run. And we use it with books, and we look up we use books as oracles, and then we look up, it's called actually psychomancy, and we look up the number and then see what page it relates to and to see how it impacts us personally. How does it reflect us? Because I think one of the things, I know that yes, we can impact, we can change the outer world, etc. But I think there's a step that we miss, which is that we are not only self-generated power beings. We work in tandem with something greater than us. This is the universe, which is consciousness that is fundamental to all life. So for me, I am most interested in bringing people into the concept of synchronicity so that they start trusting that it's possible. There's trusting that they're in a partnership. Then we can look at, I can influence a number generator. I can influence reality, but what are we influencing it for? That's the other piece, right? So if we're influencing it for the highest good of all, then we're going to need that partnership, because our soul, or the blueprint, again, that's just my language. Imagine that consciousness made each one of us, that we are a reflection of that consciousness. I like to call it divinity, that within every one of us, there's this divine spark, this divine blueprint, that we're here for something very specific and unique to each one of us. Like, we each play a role and play a note in the symphony of life, and only each of us knows how to bring it into harmony, because we can be disharmonious or incoherent, or coherent, right, and harmonious. So if we look to that blueprint that we each have, that there's this consciousness that can guide us and lead us, then the motive behind why we would want to impact a number generator then becomes in alignment with the greater good, as opposed to just, I can move this.
Yeah, it's
You know
not
what I
just
mean?
a parlor trick.
Yeah, no, exactly.
Yeah.
And I come from a profession where people actually have said, this is a parlor trick. How do you know? You're reading my mind, blah, 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 blah. Like, how do you know?
Yeah.
So I think it's key right now too, especially with the way the world is the way it is,
Yeah.
that
Yeah.
we understand what our why is. What's our why?
When you mentioned divine spark, it reminded me of how people say that we're made of stardust.
Yeah.
I think we're made of God dust. It's because the
Yeah.
stars are made of God, and everything is made of God. And so
Yep.
that divine spark is actually God dust that we're made out of. I just think that's a much more magical way to look at reality. And also that instead of, I just got goosebumps, I just got angel bumps, right? The angels just sent me a confirmation.
I
So
think what's really key when we say the word dust, that, when we think of God dust, we
mm,
think of dust as inanimate, right? That it's not animate, right? It's just dust. Dust is something that's left over. But the truth is God dust is alive. God dust is how we are animated. It is the particles, but what is behind those particles is the consciousness of God, or spirit, or whatever you want to call it, or however your listeners like to identify with that. And so, my work, and I really do think I got a second chance at life once I got clean and sober. It's almost been 37 years, a day at a time, so I could be dead. So for me, this is my gift back. Like, I want to learn as much as I can and give as much as I can back, so that I can enhance this very thing that you're talking about, because I've seen evidence of it. And that, but we do need protocols and systems and things like that to help us maintain that, since we're also made to pay attention to what is most chaotic, frightful, negative, because we have something called a negative bias. And the reticular activating system of our brain, that is how our brains work, is going to look for evidence in the outer world for anything that we're rehearsing internally. We rehearse an idea long enough, it's going to look for it. So that's why this time right now, we're being so conditioned to see the world a certain way. Like, look at the pandemic, was a perfect example of hysteria.
Yeah.
Like this really happened, but the hysteria made people sicker. That's my opinion of that. I'm not an anti anything. I'm a very much the person that's in the middle of the bridge. I'm fascinated by both sides. That's not a popular place to stand. I get it. You have to be one or the other, and I won't choose. I just want to learn and find what is the best of both, right? Because we do need the nuance. We need to come together somehow. But these things that media and how we're impacted by social media, etc., I think is something that we need to look at right now, given how influenced we are by energy. And then we're going to continue to look for evidence in the outer world for the same thing. And yet, if we just shifted our consciousness, which we can once we start to see the synchronicity and basically God working anonymously in our lives, which is through those synchronistic, meaningful coincidences, and we keep thinking, wait a sec, there's something operating on my behalf and in my favor, then we can choose where our attention is going to go and see more evidence of that, given that literally anything is available to us at any time, at all times right now, especially with the access that we have in the cybersphere, right? There's the noosphere, then there's the cybersphere, the technosphere. You have all these spheres of potentiality, and we have to be very careful right now. Where is our attention going?
That's our most valuable asset.
Yeah. So where is that attention, and where are we compelled? Right now you'll hear everybody talking about trauma. That's become very popular. I think that the term has become a bit misused too. And all of a sudden everybody is in, oh, that's my trauma. So there's excuses. Oh, no, I can't do that because I'm traumatized. I can't. Or like, oh, that's my trigger. And I'm noticing this spiral of everybody sharing all of this, when some of the best teachers that I'm seeing out there are saying, no. We're just acknowledging this so that we can live both and. We're not saying it's an excuse. So I'm seeing where all our attention is going now. It's like fascinating. It's like, okay, now we're going to talk about this. Okay, now we're going to talk about that. And then, but when are we actually going to live in the solution? And it's really when we wear the world loosely around our shoulders and put God as our attention, right? The dust, God dust is our attention. That's what, okay, so what does our soul want? The small self. And how we're conditioned to view the world. It's fascinating. Anyway,
Yeah.
we'll see what happens over the next little while. But I'm acutely aware of when I'm coming from a conditioned response, and I'm acutely aware of the potentiality of when I can snap out of it.
Yeah. Speaking of potentialities and all these different options and choices and perhaps alternate realities that we create through our
Yep.
choices. So 37 years sober, there
Yeah.
must have been some timelines where you died instead of made it.
Well, it's interesting because when I was 22 or 23, I had gone to this really famous psychic that all my friends went to. And they were like, oh my God, this guy is so amazing. And he was visiting Toronto, where I'm from. And I decided I was going to wait in line and go see this guy. It wasn't that expensive. So it was a tea room. I had saved up my money. It was expensive to me back then. Anyway, I waited 2.5 hours sitting on the floor outside of this little dingy little office where this guy had set himself up, right? And I expected him to tell me about how he's going to be a famous singer-songwriter, how all these dreams of mine were going to come true, et cetera, et cetera. And instead, he sat me down and said, basically, your family's going to fall apart, which actually did happen. You're going to have a very short life. All the men you're going to meet are not going to be faithful to you. Your artistic career is going to basically go nowhere. Like it was like, how about this? At the end of it, I was like, I hated him. Okay. But
Oh,
I have to say this.
no.
No. I mean, it was like crazy. I was a practicing the reason why I trusted him is because he knew I had been raped, and he knew that all the details. It was so freaky that I just sat there in awe. And then he told me all this other shit that was going to happen. What ended up happening was, I did bottom out when I was 27, but everything he said came true over those 5 years between 22 and 27. Literally everything. I got in a relationship with a sex addict who wasn't faithful. I got, everything. My parents lost all their money, blah, blah, blah. All the real stuff happened. Then what happened was I bottomed out. I had an incredible spiritual experience in the bathroom of a drug dealer's house. I went up. I hadn't slept or bathed in 7 days, and I was up looking at myself in the mirror, finally seeing myself as I truly was, not as I was a legend in my own mind past the freebase pipe. But it was this sense of knowing that I was going to die, and I asked for help. Not help me so I can get out of this so I could do it again later. It was like, I am done. Help me. I don't know. I am surrendered. And literally, I know that I literally moved to another dimension of potentiality, and literally, like, I know I walked from one side to another, and it was like the Red Sea parted. I also knew I would never have to go back there, and I would never have to repeat this or that. I didn't know how, and I had no clue. There was absolutely no certainty whatsoever in front of me. I had to surrender to the what was uncharted, and I created a new life.
So you jumped timelines.
I did, and I changed
Yeah.
my past. And how I changed my past was not is sending healing back to my past, although I will say that I have done that to me. For me, it was through my perception. As I got clean and sober and worked a spiritual program, I started in 12-step programs, and then, did a lot of spiritual exploration in Tibetan Buddhism, and I spent a lot of time at the temple learning how to meditate and other various, and of course diving deep into Course in Miracles and other esoteric, more ancient esoteric works. I came to the conclusion that the way I perceived my story from my past was really based on me accepting I was victimized, for sure, but I chose the victimhood of that. And so instead, I chose to see that as an event, and that I could forgive and love and do whatever I needed to do to heal from that, because I wasn't broken. And I could see myself fully and everyone as being whole. And that was just part of what made me me. And I was able to see how I saw my parents differently. I have deep respect for them. I was like, they're such bad parents. They were great parents. But it was like, once I could change the story and my vantage point changed, my entire past changed. So the timeline, even of my past, shifted because I could see it with a completely different pair of eyes.
Well, when the past shifts, a whole lot of people can see that change through things like Mandela effects. Oh, I remember the Fruit of the Loom logo having a cornucopia, and never did.
It did.
Masses of
Wait,
people.
it didn't?
Not in this timeline.
Whoa, that is bizarre that you said that. As soon as you said Fruit of the Loom of the cornucopia, I actually remember it as having cornucopia.
So
And
do
you're
I.
saying it doesn't.
Mirror, mirror on the wall, right? Disney movie never said mirror, mirror on the wall. She said magic mirror on the wall in this timeline.
Interesting.
Yeah, that's fun. I love going down these rabbit holes around
I love it too.
timelines.
Rabbit hole is
and
my
yeah.
jam. Isn't that interesting? The things
Yeah.
that we remember or pick up, and I don't know about you, but I'm good friends with Greg Braden, and he and I have talked often about the potential of the world being a simulation,
Mhm.
right?
Yeah.
And a couple of times I have actually, when I had some friends over once, my friends sang the Gayatri mantra on a New Year's Eve, and all of a sudden the whole room started, like the sides of it started disappearing. It was the trippiest thing. And it's happened to me a couple of times at the dentist, of all places,
Mm.
where everything just dissolves. And I'm in another place waking up, and and this is like I woke up from one life and they're telling me to go back to the other one. It's so bizarre. There's so many things that we don't know about life.
But we can open our heart and our minds with the willing suspension of disbelief, and then ask our guides, ask our angels, ask God directly, please show or tell me now what I need to know about the nature of this reality. Like, for example, many, many, many years ago, I saw the movie The 13th Floor, which came out around the same time as The Matrix. It's like late 90s. My guides showed me a vision from that movie that I hadn't thought of for a long time, where they ran to the end of the simulation. Like, it wasn't rendering yet. It was just wireframe and green.
Whoa.
And that's basically what happens when you go down these rabbit holes. This is what I was told. When you go down these rabbit holes, you are inviting the universe to fill in the rendering. What used to be just wireframe around such horrific things, I'm not even going to name them. They're
Yeah,
like,
we won't call them.
yeah,
Yeah.
because we actually like the Harry Potter movie, like the one who won't who won't
He
be
who
named.
shall not be named.
Yes, exactly. Because what we're doing by going down those dark dystopian rabbit holes is we are creating the actual reality. It's like, no,
Correct.
this exists. Like, look, I spent hours upon hours researching this. Like, these sorts of terrible sacrifices and whatever that are happening from the dark side are real. Well, you just made them much more real. They were
By
just
calling them.
wireframes, and now they're full 3D renderings.
That's just like what I was saying with the reticular activating system of
Yeah.
the brain. We're going to start to look for evidence in the outer world, and it will come to us like it's like it spotlights. Bruce Lipton said very eloquently in his book, The Biology of Belief, that we are literally bombarded by millions and millions of potential data and stimuli that we are incapable of processing. So, this is a processing system that we have that's going to choose for us what we can handle or what we've accepted as reality. There's only so much that we're capable of processing. So,
Yeah.
wherever our attention, our belief system, our thoughts, feelings, beliefs, and rehearsed reality is going to show us, we are in charge of that. We are not, yes, we're conditioned, but we can wake up and refuse that conditioning, although there is a consequence. And I think that what happens, and a lot of people are scared to do that, because all of a sudden you may not have much in common with the other people that you are in your little pod, that you may all of a sudden realize, oh, I can't be connected to this person anymore. I'm not in alignment with them anymore. I'm not engaged in this dynamic anymore. So I will lose something. What will I lose? And we have to be willing to lose it all. That's what I think.
How about this? I learned in Kabbalah that loss is an illusion.
Oh, interesting. Okay. So,
So loss is an illusion. So if we are in a simulation, that means pretty much we're Truman in the Truman Show, and everybody's in on the gig except us. So if we elevate our consciousness, we can change the whole nature of reality, and not just in our local reality, but the global reality of,
uh-huh.
let's say, World War III is about to happen. Now it doesn't.
And I think that very subject that you're talking about right now is something that is very much on people's minds, and like getting close, getting far, doing accepting this as a reality, not accepting it is an interesting wave that's going to the population. And so, have you ever considered who's pulling the strings? I'm not a conspiracy person. I'm not a conspiracy person at all. Like, I'm just not. Like I said, I'm fast. I'm a curious person, and I'm a person who likes to learn, but I don't join any one idea, because I think there's many. But what do you think?
There's so many layers to that. The layers of reality around this, it's fascinating.
Yeah,
So, for example, you could make a very strong case that there are dark forces, a shadow
sure,
government that is pulling the strings. Above that is the higher truth that the darkness is already lost and the light has already won, and they just
right,
haven't gotten the memo yet. So, and then
right,
there's
and we haven't
another
caught up,
level of reality where there is nothing but God. It's just me and God. Anything that is not love is part of the illusion. The only thing that's
right?
real here is God. So if depending on where you want to focus the lens, you could say, well, here's the reality around who's pulling the strings, but then, oh, wait a second, everything and everybody ends up working for God, even the dark forces.
So this is an interesting conversation. So I'd like to pause it then with this in mind. And again, we're just having a conversation. What a great podcast. If that were true, let's just say, if that were true, hypothetically,
Mm-hmm.
then we would conclude that everything is neutral, that there is no good or bad, that there is one that creates chaos, disharmony, etc. Like one that is incoherent and the other one that is coherent, harmonious, etc. But both are just states,
Mm-hmm.
both able to exist in their own integrity, and neither one good or bad. They just, this one is that, this one is this.
Yeah.
And then that the nature of duality then comes up, because it's like, is that also an illusion? And in fact, if everything is God, then we come right back to the same idea of what is our choice. We can't abdicate our choice.
Right.
If we're going to go to everything as God, what's our choice going to be? If we can't say we don't like this to the left, right? Like the dark force. Oh, I want to fight against something, unless you just want to fight against something. And it all comes back to our choices. And it's not easy, because even just like I said, the fact that everybody's talking about trauma recently, we're acknowledging that, wow, there's been some conditioning in here that's really harmful,
Mm-hmm.
and it has become very harmful, even though I think sometimes people don't really understand what they're saying when they personalize trauma, and they don't know they're talking kind of like therapeutically about themselves. But there's such great content out there right now, like Gabor Mate's work, Thomas Hubel, and
Yeah.
others, about how how are the system of our social structures right now have traumatized people, and how do we pull out the strands of the hairball, right, to recognize that, oh, we need some healing here. What's our responsibility for that, and then how does that impact the reality that we say we want?
Mhm.
And but it doesn't even have to be that complicated, right? It's very interesting.
Oh, it's fascinating. Well, you mentioned your interest in quantum physics. So you can
Hmm.
have up quarks and down quarks. You can have them existing simultaneously. So it's not this or that, it's both. So that
Yeah.
is how duality actually operates, I believe, is that you can have both operating at the same time. And when you get to a certain level of enlightenment, my understanding is that that whole illusion falls away because it's no longer necessary. The laws of karma are here for us to understand the effects of our actions. Because if everything happens simultaneously, like it does on the other side of the veil, in the eternal now, past, present, future, all happening simultaneously, then we wouldn't have that length of time to really grok the consequences of our actions.
You're one of the first few people that use the term grok. I say it all the time, and Mark's like, you can't use that word. I understood the grokking. Yeah, like how does that even work? And then how do we apply it, given that, we want to create our reality
Mhm.
for a life that is short, but that needs to be meaningful. And we're trying to, all of us, slow it all down and have some type of control over it, when in fact that's not how it works, right? It's just really interesting.
Yeah, yeah.
I think I want to go back to why I use oracle cards and why I teach people how to use oracle cards, is that it enables us to get out of that confused soup of a head and into like one reflective subject that could say to us, this is a dominant energy you're working with right now, or this is what you can't see right now, or this is your next right action. I don't use the cards so much as predictive tools as I am prescriptive. Like, this is what's going on now. If you want to be in alignment with what's in your highest good, here's what you have to do next, or here's what you need to really focus on, given that we are also operating through the filter of our life experience and personalities, which are often the result of layers and layers of conditioning, and, like they say, trauma, right? And our responses to that, and then we keep perpetuating it. So what I love to be able to do is to show people how to pattern interrupt that, because working with the cards completely interrupt the pattern. It's like, oh, wait a sec, that's actually the thing I'm doing unconsciously is definitely not in alignment with where I say I want to go. There's little Coco. There's Coco doozy. Look at you, little boo boo.
Oh, that is
So this is my
crazy.
dog.
Okay, I got
Those
to
of you
tell you
on YouTube.
something. Okay. This is the second time in 3 hours where I've heard the name Coco. And
Really?
yeah, it's not often. And
That's
what happened
ooh.
when we got this duckling that was a rescue in our backyard, his mother abandoned him. He would have died without our intervention. So we
Oh.
took him in. My wife, Orion, came up with the name Coco, and she's also very connected with the other side of the veil. So she said, I think his name is Coco, this tiny little duckling.
Isn't that funny?
And then I got 7 different confirmations through the course of that week that it was Coco. Like, I'd go through the mall, and there were 2 different stores that had Coco in the name. And it was just like one thing after another. I'd get on social media, and there'd be somebody commenting named Coco, and like it was nonstop the whole week. Like, okay, yeah, that's
Then
Coco.
I have a dog, Coco, that I never. And by the way, she's quite skittish, and she only has like a two-thirds of a skull, so she knows how to protect herself, because if she hits her head or something happens, she literally could die.
Hmm.
The vet told us that she basically needed to be wrapped up in cotton batting or put in a crate, for the rest of her life. And we're like, no, we're going to let her play and do whatever she wants. And if this is the way she's going to go, she's going to go that way. And she's, of course, lived 4 more years than was predicted. But anyway, so she never comes up on my lap. That's, no, and especially not when Tinkerbell is sitting up beside me, who is like the ruler of the roost. She just walked right by her and asked me to pick her up. So that was also very funny. So proof is in the pudding of the fact that synchronicity, or the universe wanting to get our attention, to talk about what is coherent, what is in alignment, what is similar between us, or what is the conversation, which is, yeah, there's something going on that we have no control over, and we are not the instigators of that,
And
right? There's
check this out too. There's this operating goodness that directs us to use certain terminology. I don't often use the term grok. It's
Isn't
not
that
common.
funny?
It's not common, but here's what it reminded me of when I did use it, and then you responded to that. So I use that term all the time. I was on a call with a mastermind I'm in, and it's a group of men, entrepreneurs, and we're doing reading together of different books that are spiritually based books, and like The Alchemist is one.
Hmm.
You Were Born for This by Bruce Wilkinson is another. One of the guys in the group, I'm just saying something, giving some advice relating to his relationship. I don't remember exactly the context, but I remember the word. I said, she's not trying to punk you. It's not a term I use. I never use that word punk or punked. But he's like, whoa, what did you just say? Because I literally say this to her all the time. Stop punking me. So that really hit home for him. He's like, wow, this
Hmm.
wasn't just Stephan just giving some common sense advice. No, this came from upstairs.
I think that that word actually comes from Stranger in a Strange Land, that book.
Okay.
I think that's where I first read it. So, and it's something, and then I stopped using it for the longest time because my husband says, like, what does that even mean? I'm like, I don't, I kind of trying to understand something, trying to grok it. But that
Mm-hmm.
was not funny. It's funny.
Yeah.
So we've start to pay attention to these synchronicities more in our lives. Like I pay attention. It's serving us to remember that it is not all up to us, even though we are responsible, we are responsible, but we do it in partnership with something higher than us.
Well, what I've found that I think is really important for us to operate off this principle is that the more benevolent you are, the more synchronicities arrive.
Benevolence is harmony, is coherence, right? So that's benevolence, coherence.
Yeah.
So thankful as well. Thank you is the abracadabra.
Mm-hmm.
So it's like being grateful, which is being a part of, etc. And it's not got any hubris attached to it. There's no control there. This is about being very receptive. So it's interesting that that makes a lot of sense. The more benevolent and graceful and kind you are, the more that comes back to you, because synchronicity says, hey, I'm going to help you. But I want to just question this for a second, because if we just said that everything was neutral, then would we say that there's an assumption on our part that there is benevolence, right? That we become benevolent, we see more synchronicity. But would we also see more synchronicity in the darker ends of things, the more darker, jealous, angry, neurotic, hateful we are, on that side, contrasting, then we would see more and more of that. But we don't call it synchronicity because we think that the universe always is benevolent. I mean, it's just something to think about, right?
Well, the way I think about it is if you could collapse all your desires for this incarnation into one as your higher self, what would it be? And my guess would be to cleave to the creator, to be as close to the
Oh,
creator as
yeah.
possible. And he is all goodness, right? The universe is duality. It's good and bad, it's light and dark, it's lots of contrast.
Contrast is not necessarily bad. I
Right,
think
right.
contrast is, yeah, yeah, yeah.
Contrast
I
is
get what you're saying, though.
educational because how else
Exactly.
am I going to really appreciate the sunshine if I never get rain?
Yeah, I love that. Cleave to the creator. I find the more, because I'm a painter, so I find the more art that I create, the more closer to the creator I feel I get.
Mm.
Because none of the things that I think are important to argue about are even present when I'm there, because I really become a channel for this creativity, and
Oh,
it is what it is, right?
you want to
It's
hear
really kind
something
of an
wild?
interesting thing. Yeah,
You just said the word abracadabra a few minutes ago. That's
right.
Aramaic. It's a cousin language to Hebrew. And in
Yeah.
Aramaic, it means I create like the word.
I create like the word.
Like,
Somebody wrote a book. Pam Grout wrote a book about it, about that, and about that it came from Aramaic. That, yeah, I create like the word, and in the Bible, it's first there was the word, and the word was God.
right?
So whatever we utter as human beings, whatever we present, whatever we express, because that's word is expression, right? That it doesn't mean word talking; it means to express energy. then that is what's going to arise for us.
Mm-hmm.
And when we have a lot more people expressing fear and a lot more people expressing negativity and challenge, etc., and a lot more people, that we're going to see more of that. So we can't always choose our reality, but we can respond to the reality that is, created by the greater, right, by the greater population, if you will, in a way that's graceful, because we know that, oh, I didn't choose that, but I can respond to it in a way where I can see it as just part of the story. And I can figure out what it means or what I make it mean later, because you can have a million iterations as you grow and evolve and see your own consciousness change.
And another thing too that I found to be really helpful as you create more benevolence and more synchronicities, or invite them into your reality, is to ask for the most benevolent outcome, rather than saying, is this for my highest and best good, or is this for this person's highest and best good? If you ask for the most benevolent outcome for this person and everyone else involved, then it takes into account all timelines, all potentialities, and brings about the very best for everybody involved.
See, I don't see the difference between the language. So when I say for the highest good of all, that means, to
Oh, that could be
me,
the same.
that
Yeah,
means,
that could be the
but
same.
I like the language, because you say for my highest good, then it indicates that just yours. But I always say for the highest good.
Mm.
But I love but I do love that the idea for the most benevolent outcome for all.
Yeah. So the most benevolent outcome is a term I learned from Jan Tober. And Jan Tober, she's the life partner of Lee Carroll. Lee Carroll's wife is Jan Tober. I spoke to her, and she told me about this. And she learned about it from Tom T. Moore. Tom T. Moore, who wrote The Gentle Way, and it's all about MBOs, most benevolent outcomes. It's a very powerful technology.
You just gave me a good idea for my mastermind, because I give my mastermind books to read. I run a mastermind with 24 people, and we read things, talk about them, use them as oracles, and actually all about being as open as we can to the person we want to become. So that's actually very interesting, because most benevolent outcome. I like the feeling of that, rather than because I naturally say for the highest good of all,
Mm-hmm.
but now when I say for the most benevolent outcome for all, that feels somehow where I'm actually really claiming that this is good for everybody and not going to cause any harm. Benevolence is like there's like a grace and a generosity there.
Mm-hmm.
Mm.
Yeah.
Ooh, I'm going to go down the rabbit hole on
Yeah.
that one.
Well, here's another rabbit hole for you. You know the term maktub. It's Arabic. Maktub means it is written. I learned it from reading the book or listening to the book, The Alchemist. So the idea is that everything is already written, at least in this timeline. You can get a timeline upgrade and get a whole new script to your movie.
Yep.
But in this timeline, everyth's already written.
Wow, I love that. Okay, so let me ask you this then. So if everything is written in this particular timeline, how would you, in your estimation, get that? You mentioned the upgrade, a timeline upgrade. What are your protocols to get that timeline upgrade, or is there anything that we could do? Like in my case, it's really doing the shadow work and working with oracle cards, and being willing to look at your past through a different lens, etc. So I have all kinds, but I want to know if there's any more I don't have.
Well, there's a blog post by Tom Kenyon called "The Art of Jumping Timelines." By the way, have you ever watched the movie Sliding Doors?
Sure.
Yeah, great movie.
I
And
loved that
so,
movie. That was one of my favorite movies. I totally loved
well,
it, because it was like I've done that. I've slid a door and went to a different timeline. I mean, I have done that
yeah.
already.
And then there are timeline bleed throughs where,
Right.
in one timeline, she almost passes out while she's serving a table as a waitress. And in the other timeline, at that exact moment, she does actually pass out.
Bleed throughs. Okay, so go back to my question.
Yeah. So the idea here is, if you want a timeline upgrade, then you have to be extra, extra benevolent beyond your normal comfort zone. Okay, so here's something that happened a year ago. I was driving with my family in the car, and normally I would give money to a homeless person, maybe $5 or something, occasionally a 20, but I wouldn't go out of my way, like pull the car over sort of thing and do like, so this was outside my comfort zone. But I saw this lady who was just sitting on the bus stop bench. She had some bags with her, and she was clearly homeless and in pretty bad straits. And something just, I don't know, popped,
Yeah.
and it said, "Give her money." So it was out of my way, but I went and I had to turn right a couple of times and pull into a parking lot and get out of the car and hand her money. And she wasn't expecting anyone to stop. And I hand her some money, and she is so grateful, and she smiles. And when she smiles, she's got one tooth, just one tooth. And she was just beaming at me and just so grateful. And it just felt so sweet, like just beautiful. It was a beautiful moment. So I kept waving to her, and she kept waving back as I'm pulling out to leave. And my wife doesn't really take notice. So she's like, I don't know, on her phone or something. Shortly thereafter, I got the download, or I got the intuitive sense that she was an angel. That
Mm.
was a test. I did get confirmation that that was the case. So that's an example of getting a timeline upgrade. I didn't do it to get a timeline upgrade. I did it because it just felt right.
So tell me how that became, how did that translate into a timeline upgrade for you? What is your definition of a timeline upgrade?
Whole new script.
A whole new
I don't
script.
know what my
Right.
original
I get it. I
script for
get
the
it.
movie was, but it's an inner knowing. It's a knowing that something happened where I just got like the whole airplane got upgraded to business class, not just me.
I totally understand exactly what you're saying because it's not intellectual. It is a feeling state. You just know that
Yeah.
nothing will be the same from here on in. And because it's uncharted, right? It's just unknown. But there are certain timelines that will repeat because you keep repeating unconscious patterns, etc. So you're actually in a loop. But then when you make that kind of ultimate, I mean, there's something that you do. I don't know if that's the best example necessarily. You're a man of privilege who gave somebody, some money on the street. But I get it. It was like what instilled something in you was that you genuinely wanted to help. You gave this money, and then you felt it was an angel, and then you had this confirmation. So, but not always is that. But it's
Yeah.
these kind of. But you did say it's out of your comfort zone, and
And I'm notoriously stingy
oh,
or
that's good.
have
That's what
been.
I was kind of like. How is that right? Because you
Yeah, it's uncomfortable to give money. So it just getting into the new comfort zone of giving money to homeless people was uncomfortable for a while. It still
hmm
isn't like super comfortable, but going out of my way and like taking 10 minutes to like pull over and do all this stuff to do this, that was definitely not something I would have normally done. So when you go off of the your kind of regular track, that's where the magic can happen over and above the script that you've been given that has already magic in it.
yeah.
But if you're
I
like, all right, I want to like, I want to go like, whatever the analogy is, I want the red carpet version, or I
I get
want,
it. Yeah.
yeah,
I get it because also you gave such you don't know you could have saved somebody's life. You could have saved her life, right? It's like we don't know the impact that we have on other people.
yeah,
And some I think oftentimes we just we walk by people in need, etc. With blinders on and we don't even know what one small movement towards somebody could actually do for them or for us, right? It's an interesting thing, especially since we live in a world with so much inequity.
yeah,
And and it is I think about that every day. So what's my part in that and how can I cause less harm? And also what can I do to be more benevolent? But benevolence doesn't necessarily mean charitable, right? But it doesn't necessarily mean that. I think it means just loving, period, right?
yeah.
Right,
Yeah, and
loving.
actually, I think it may be that sometimes the charity gets in the way of the highest benevolent,
Mm-hmm.
most benevolent outcome, because if you take away their free choice, and they needed to hit rock bottom in order to get
100%.
the epiphany, and you
They
just
say
robbed them of that.
in 12-step programs they say never rob anybody of their bottom. that you
Yeah.
don't know. Because if you can be like a rescuer and you say, oh no, that person doesn't learn because you don't let them hit bottom. But I think our intuition, when our intuition rather than our ego, it's not like, oh, I'm a privileged person, I'm going to give this away. It felt like, no, this person needs this and
Yeah.
I'm going to give it. I feel
Yeah.
it. I feel it. It's a
It's like it
righteous
popped
choice. Yeah.
almost like, you get angel numbers, I think on like billboards or road signs,
Hmm.
or when you're reading from a book, or you're looking on social media or something, a number, or a digital clock, of course, is the most obvious one, but
1111.
it just pops, right? It's like it jumps off the screen or off of
And
the
you know
the, the
it.
page, and otherwise you're just kind of like
Looping.
looping, exactly. And
It's just
speaking of
looping.
which, I learned that ghosts are not just the souls of people who haven't crossed over to the light. They're on a loop. It's like a repeating loop, like a stuck in time sort of thing, where the ghost keeps walking up the stairs in this haunted house, back and forth, up the stairs, up the stairs. Why? Because it's a soul fragment that was so traumatized in that experience
Ah,
in that house, they
it
just
got
keep
stuck.
reliving it over and over and over again. Yeah.
It's funny. I've never had an experience with a ghost, even though I'm a medium. I've had my own television show as a medium. It's like talking to dead people is one of my most favorite things to do. I do it on Spirit Jam and my membership site, the Oracle Circle membership. So it's interesting, but I've never had a haunting experience. Nothing negative, nothing dark has ever come to me. It's an interesting thing. So I am curious, but the paranormal, all of the typical darker stuff doesn't even interest me at all. So, but I love to hear these things about the loops because I also feel like they're echoes that,
Yeah.
that's it's like an echo. Whereas what I do, it's a dynamic thing that's actually happening in the now with these people in front of me, and this is what's going on. It's not a looped anything. It's like this is real. We're having a
Yeah.
real conversation here.
Yeah.
So
But
yeah, it's
it's really
interesting.
trippy is I just learned that the present moment that we think of as the present moment is also an echo. It's a it's in the past. So this conversation we're having right now is in the past, even though we think it's right now in the present moment. It's in the past, and the present moment actually exists when we go inward and we shut off all the five senses, and we just become one with the no thing, no place, no time, no body.
That sounds like Joe
That's where
Dispenza.
exactly. I mean, that part of it, I pulled in that part of Joe Dispenza, but I learned about this from watching a channeling of Sam the Illusionist, who was a guest
Huh?
on this podcast. And the channeling was, I forget who, but saying that the present isn't what you think it is. It's not here.
Right.
You think
It's not a
I'm
place to.
listening, I'm paying attention.
Yeah.
Like I'm here right now. I'm 100% present. Well, actually, that's great. And this is not the present. This is the past still.
Wow.
Whoa.
Whoa.
Mind blowing. All right. I know we're
Yeah.
out of time. So
What a
if
fascinating conversation. I'm going to have you on my podcast too.
oh, I would love to. I'd love to. I know you got lots of people talking about their stories of spiritual awakening. I've got some wild stories I could talk about. So
Yeah, we
yeah,
have
that'd be fun.
yeah, the podcast is really all about, really it's interviews. I talk about people's origin story and everything too. And it's a lot of scientists and spiritual teachers, et cetera, et cetera. And the common denominators that we all have are quite interesting, that
Yeah.
we all see ourselves as so unique and individual. Although we also share a basic humanity that I think all of us are trying to underline and bring forward in a way that's unique to us, but for the common good. I think it's kind of cool. So I have a free guide for the listeners of your podcast, and it's called How to Ask the Right Questions of Oracle Cards. Get real answers to life's questions, big and small, and learn how easy it is to use Oracle cards to guide your path. All you have to do is go to ColetteBaron-Reid.com/optimized.
I will put the link in the show notes as well. Absolutely.
Excellent. What a
All
pleasure.
right.
What a fun conversation.
Yes, it was. And it was already written.
Yeah.
Oh, fun stuff. All right, Colette, thank you so much. You're such an amazing light in the world. And I and many others really appreciate what you're doing out in the world.
It was a real pleasure. Thank you right back. Take care.
Okay. And thank you, listener. We'll catch you on the next episode. Have a fantastic week. Reveal some light in the world. We'll catch you on the next episode. I'm your host, Stephan Spencer, signing off.